This week on To the Contrary. First, Roman Catholic women priests speak out as the Pope's visit approaches. Then, men sue for parental leave. Behind the headlines, Cracking the Code, Girls Embracing Computer Science. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the Pope's U.S. tour. Pope Francis is embarking on a 6-day visit across Washington, D.C., New York, and Philadelphia, starting this coming week. The popular pontiff is expected to draw adoring crowds of millions of people. The Pope has brought many Catholics who had drifted away back to the flock with his warm, affirming tone. But he hasn't changed Catholic dogma much, and not all Catholics are satisfied with his work, particularly women, when it comes to women's issues. While he talks about more women in church leadership, asked about ordaining women as priests, he said that door is closed. Breakaway groups such as the Roman Catholic women priests remain optimistic, but feel the Pope is ignoring sexism in the church while using love-filled words.
His embrace of the poor is just breathtaking. The things he says about the environment, the accumulation of wealth, and I think he's right on track. Where he has a huge beam in his eye is the role of women in all of this, because you can't lift women up and then not recognize the cultural imperatives that essentially make women among the poorest of the poor. Tone obviously is very, very important. The whole idea of setting the tone of a conversation. But if you're not going to have that conversation, it's pretty much useless.
So the tone of the Pope on LGBTQ is, who am I to judge? The tone on social justice causes is, let's be more for the poor. But the tone on women priests is, the door is shut, literally. So what do you think?
That's a kind of change that I don't think we'll see in our lifetime. I don't think you'll see women priests in the Catholic Church. Of course, we've seen it in other groups of Christianity, but not in the Catholic Church. I don't think the Catholic Church is ready for that at this point.
Yeah, but we have seen some surprising changes. Taking on a controversial issue like climate change and siding with the nuns who had been called up because they didn't emphasize abortion enough. Not change in doctrine, but a significant change.
This is puzzling because he's the first pope to have ever had a female boss. He was a chemical assistant in a lab years before he entered. And I think the priesthood, the Roman Catholic women's priests are going out there and they're doing things without the Vatican's approval. And I think we will see women priests in our lifetime in the Catholic Church. I'm confident.
Bottom line is this: there's no such thing as social justice without equality and respect for women. And so no matter what the tone is, Pope Francis clearly has a lot of work to do.
Well, do you think it will get done anytime soon? I mean, it's interesting because, as the priest pointed out, whom we just interviewed, he is for economic justice, but 2/3 of the world's poor are women and girls.
Well, women are involved in the Catholic Church. They're not priests, but they're involved in many other parts. They run the schools almost single-handedly. They're involved in the service, the Catholic Church service every week. They distribute communion. They participate in the Mass. They're not priests. There are girl altar servers now, so that was a big step forward. It used to be just only boys could do that. But the Catholic Church is not made up of just people looking to move it forward into something outside of what the regular confines of the religion. I mean, there are people who are far more conservative in the Catholic Church who feel like Pope Francis has already strayed too far to the left at the expense of their more conservative base. So it's just trying to call the Catholic Church one group who may all be looking toward progress. I don't think that really describes who the congregants are. A lot of people think it's already gone a little bit too far. He's not stayed to the message of an anti-abortion.
Sure, plenty of
so there's plenty of that too.
Catholics feel that way.
But if that certainly there are folks who feel that way, and there's a sizable number, but if you look at the hard numbers, actually, you know, Catholic people would like to see changes within the church. There's a majority who would like to see a relaxation of the ideas on birth control, that accepting birth control, accepting contraception, but also on things like...
Well, and there's also 98% of American women use birth control, and 98 or 99% of American Catholic women use it.
Yeah, the numbers are virtually the same. And, you know, as someone who grew up Catholic, and also my mother who went to Catholic school throughout, I mean, she presented it to me as a no-brainer when I was a kid. Well, of course you'd want to be on birth control. You don't want to get pregnant when you don't want to be pregnant. I mean, this is something that time and again, you know, whether they're Catholic or not, people around this country know that birth control is something that women are capable of deciding for themselves.
Well, you grew up Catholic. You left the church?
I have not been in a while. You know, for me, the breaking point was actually on the priest sex abuse scandals. I learned more about that in 2002 and was really upset. I met Jeffrey Anderson, one of the lawyers who was working on the sex abuse trials in Minnesota, and it became very difficult for me to reconcile how I could go back in. And so to this day, I'm very interested in...
Are you tempted by this Pope and his... nobody can deny that his attitude is refreshing. The question is, to me anyway, what's he really going to do for women? And how can women sit back and expect him to do for them without showing a signal like leaving the church if they're dissatisfied with what he is or isn't doing?
I don't think Catholic women are going to leave the church because there aren't women priests. I think overall the church has a problem just needing to draw back people into the church.
I know it'll be small, but you don't think some will?
You know, I don't think that's their biggest problem right now. I think there's probably a little bit of a divide about message, you know, birth control or abortion or other things that are central to Catholic beliefs. I'm not sure that not having a female priest is really going to be as big of a problem, just because women are involved in the Catholic Church.
I see what he's doing. I see him as a master strategist.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Pope, who understands his church throughout the millennia, here I'm speaking as a non-Catholic, believes you can move an institution like that very rapidly.
That's right.
What he is showing, and what none of us expected, is that you can move it even slowly, and that he's doing.
And let's not forget, this is a Pope from Argentina, where Eva Perón was a force. He's seen women in political power. He sat with women who were in the slums in Argentina, talking about just putting food on the table and how difficult it was for them. And he's been a champion for those women, not women looking to break the glass ceiling, women who are having trouble even just making it through each day. So I think he is a champion for that, and I agree with the delegate. This is going to be slow. I do expect him to pivot.
I was asking.
Yeah, one of the most important things I think to remember is, again, if you look at the data, actually Catholic people, and by that I mean people who are actively practicing, as well as people who have lapsed, like myself, as well as people who go to church frequently. You know, there are actually a range of people who would like to see change, not just on birth control, but on allowing priests to be married, on allowing women priests. I mean, there's actually solid numbers backing that up. Yeah. And so if you look at Catholic people, it's a very different mindset than what's coming out of the all-male hierarchy of the church. What's different about Pope Francis is, at least in tone, often, but not always, he taps into that. And so it is very encouraging. You know, it's a time for more change. I just hope much more is to come.
I think it's true that there are no valid theological arguments. I went to Catholic school for 7 years. I know that does not make me an expert, but I've been fascinated by this. And there's no valid theological argument saying that women cannot be ordained and they cannot receive holy orders.
Because they're supposed to reflect Christ, and Christ was, of course, a man.
Of course, that's always the argument that Rome gives. But I don't think that's true. Women were at the Last Supper. Women, they were told that do this, you know, because of me, by Jesus Christ. I think this is a lot of confusion and history of their being prejudiced by males in the Catholic Church against women. I think that's where it really stems from.
Last word, Eleanor.
Well, I think I'm going to give this Pope credit, because I am so amazed to see a Pope that can appeal to both Catholics and non-Catholics and move not only his church forward, but move us all forward.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay. From women priests to paternal leave. Parental leave is not just a woman's issue. New dads are reportedly suing employers in greater numbers, charging sex discrimination because they're offered less family leave time than new mothers. They also say they face harassment and retaliation for simply taking leave. A recent high-profile case highlighted in the New York Times focuses on a CNN correspondent, Josh Levs. He claims the company's paid parental leave policy discriminates against biological fathers. He was offered 2 weeks compared with the 10 weeks mothers and couples adopting children received. 21% of U.S. companies offer paid maternity leave, while 17% offer paid paternity leave. So, Congresswoman Norton, 21%, I mean, it's way up from where it was 15, 20 years ago, but it's still only 1/5. What needs to be done about that? And is this a positive sign that men are now seeking more paternity leave? Because we all know when the men start wanting it, there's going to be more action.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. And while these numbers are pitiful, really pitiful, and one of the reasons why I think people don't have as many children as they may otherwise have, I think that the agency I once headed, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is moving us in the right direction. They are dividing the time a woman takes as disability time related to pregnancy, which I would also relate to nursing, and saying that may be a reason for a differentiation between men and women. But after that period, hey, everything has to be equal.
Well, there's also, if you have a C-section, cesarean section, you can't be on your feet as quickly. I think that's part of the reason why, too. But it's very interesting that men are now pushing for paternity leave. But just remember, this all has an impact on businesses, big and small. The big businesses can probably handle that kind of thing a lot easier than a smaller business. And you just have to think about what is incorporated into trying to give everybody maternity leave, paternity leave, sick leave. The costs do add up, and that is part of the equation as why this is moving so slowly.
Now, small businesses usually are not counted. It's usually
under 50 employees.
50 and under.
And we are a 4-person nonprofit, and we had, unfortunately, we could not afford to replace the person and pay her maternity.
So that's why
we had somebody. So we, right.
I'd say there ought to be a law. I mean, that seems like there's part of this issue here is that, you know, first of all, roughly half the workforce is covered under this idea of being able to get 12 weeks of unpaid leave, which is untenable for almost everyone in the first place because you can't afford 12 weeks unpaid leave. You need to be paid. You know, people are struggling. They're trying to work paycheck to paycheck here. So that doesn't make sense. And then this idea of companies, I mean, companies that are not providing parental leave should absolutely be shamed. And also if it's unequal between men and women, but we need something guaranteed. I mean, the fact that the U.S. is the only industrialized country that doesn't do this, shame on us. This is a bread and butter economic issue. It's not simply a women's issue. And, you know, it's an area where we should all be able to move forward together, left and right.
Where to begin? This is murky. This is really, it's shameful. We want to strengthen the American family, yet we're punishing some people for having families and not giving them enough time to bond. I think the CNN correspondent who's gearing up for the lawsuit against his employer for not being treated the same, he's a biological father, yet adoptive family gets to get 10 weeks. I'm not saying let's take it to the end. We're not going to, I don't want to mandate corporations say, hey, give your mothers and fathers 10 weeks. I think we're in a shameful place as to where we are. We are giving too little time to women.
We are divided nation on how high taxes should be and even on the middle and lower middle classes. I mean, taxes are high.
They are.
Do lower middle class people want to pay extra money so that somebody in the middle or upper middle class can get federally subsidized daycare?
We have to find a way to make it fair, and it's not going to be the same conversation. States are going to have different conversations. I don't think a federal blanket law is going to fix this. I think we've got to come up with solutions that don't punish women for leaving the workforce. Millennial women like me, it's like I'm being punished for wanting to have a family. I'm right now 2 months out from delivering a child, and I can't believe that I don't know what I'm going to do in the aftermath. I don't know how much time I can take away. Of course, I'm self-employed, so I'm an anomaly. But I really feel for the working woman that has to return right away and who doesn't have the support of a husband because he doesn't get enough time either. So it's not a one-size-fits-all policy, I think, that can remedy our situation. It's having honest conversations where businesses can talk about what is good and what is right for them. And we really have to take into account that home and work-life integration is here. We already bring our whole selves to work. So we've got to find a way to support people in this chapter of their life.
So, Congresswoman, how far away do you think, I mean, obviously in a Republican-controlled Congress, paid family leave mandates are not going to move forward. When will they, if ever, in the near future?
Yeah, candidly, I think we could change tomorrow. Women have to understand that they're like everybody else.
You think we could change tomorrow? How?
If women organized, this is the largest group in the United States. We are more dependent on them going to work than anybody else. The women's movement has its hands in a lot of things now. I can't think of any issues, and there are two that are more important and very much related than child care and leave for pregnant women and for fathers. And this can be done. There is a majority for it. Somebody's got to organize it.
All right, behind the headlines. If women are going to play meaningful roles in technology, at least one trend will have to be reversed. The percentage of women graduating with computer science degrees today is lower than it was 30 years ago. To the contrary, Profile's one program that's targeting girls in hopes they'll become tomorrow's programmers.
If I understand correctly, you are the first graduating class of Girls Who Code in Washington, D.C. So that makes you all trailblazers, something that you should be very proud of.
Graduation day for 20 girls who could help close the STEM gender gap. These Washington, D.C. high school students spent the summer getting hands-on experience with computers, robotics, web design, programming, CSS, HTML, and more. Nationwide, 1,200 girls attended one of the summer intensive classes put on by Girls Who Code.
You can learn a lot more about JavaScript classes if you want to.
Girls Who Code is dedicated to establishing a pipeline that will drive girls into the male-dominated fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. But it could be an uphill battle. More girls and young women are turning away from those disciplines. In 1984, 37% of computer science graduates were women. Today, 18%.
Oftentimes we tell our girls to, not take things apart, to not tinker, and we tell our boys to. We push our girls out. I can walk into Forever 21 and buy a t-shirt that says I'm allergic to algebra.
With messages like that, it's no surprise the U.S. STEM workforce is 74% male. Reshma Sajani, CEO of Girls Who Code, says one way to attract girls is to glamorize an occupation usually depicted as boring.
We show them how they can use technology to change the world. When they think about a computer scientist, they're thinking about a guy typing in a computer in a basement somewhere, and that's not fun, and that's not changing the world.
In order to really turn the tide in leadership opportunities, non-traditional jobs, STEM occupations, it's really going to be critical for us to do our job to make sure that women see themselves in these good jobs. And that's a combination of activities, including mentorships, how we bring people and how we give them information, how we empower them to take the next step.
Girls Who Code started with one program, 20 girls, in 2012. Now it operates 60 programs in 14 cities, including Washington, D.C., where the program launched this year. D.C. is the nation's top city for women in STEM, according to a recent Smart Asset study. Here, 42% of STEM jobs are held by women. The national average, 26%. Girls Who Code is determined to increase the number of women in STEM by partnering with universities and major corporations.
Over the next 6 to 7 years, we're going to need 1.2 million coders. The problem is we don't have a pipeline to fill those jobs. There's a major gap between the software developers we need and the software developers that are in our educational system today. One of the things I love about Girls Who Code is that they try to find girls from a diverse range of backgrounds. Few of them knew some coding before they came into the program. And it was great to hear from the teachers that even the girls that were completely new to coding were picking it up immediately.
Victoria Espinel heads BSA, the trade organization that represents software companies. She believes, despite a lack of gender and racial diversity in the field, girls should pursue STEM careers.
Don't be held back by perceptions.
Don't be held back by what people tell you is possible.
Girls Who Code reports 90% of former participants are majoring or planning to major in computer science or a related discipline in college. Espinel says business must also do its part.
It's something that the software industry is thinking about very seriously, and I know that they are looking inside at their hiring practices and they're looking for ways to promote more diversity inside the workforce. We are all going to do what we do better if we have as wide and diverse a sense of perspectives as we can possibly get.
In an era of technological growth, organizations such as BSA and Girls Who Code hope to change the face of coding.
You can't be what you cannot see. And so we show them women who look just like them that are doing the very thing that they thought they couldn't do.
This is our 24th season on PBS, and in about the third or fourth or fifth maybe, I went to Carnegie Mellon University, which had just launched a Women in Computer Science program, and they were saying exactly the same things that these women are saying now. And there's been so much effort. The National Science Foundation, independent foundations have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into luring women into computer science, and yet we're going backwards. What the heck is going on?
I think it's exactly what they were talking about in this piece. Girls Who Code is filling a niche here because girls are not finding women who look like them, talk like them, sound like them, any of that.
But how could it be worse than it was 20 years ago?
It's worse because we're encouraging our women, and young women, especially in their most formative years, those collegiate years, we're encouraging them to walk away. We're saying this is the easier road.
How?
Because we're not really guiding them. And by doing that, we're saying take the lesser road. We'll take the easier road. It's easier to go to college and study liberal arts than to hack it out in an engineering class like I did, where I was only one of 4 girls in an over 30-person class, and that was an honors class. And it was just an interesting stigma. I mean, the stigma back then was there, and I think that stigma continues to prevail. And I think that is part of the problem. We're going to see these low numbers, especially amongst minority groups, where fewer than 1 in 10 minority women is part of is an employed scientist or an engineer. That's
yeah, but
troubling.
It shouldn't be going backwards. There are very few things where we've been going backwards. We really have to put this to analysis.
And you know what makes it worse, Congresswoman, is the fact that this is the field where
all the jobs are.
Well, not just where all the jobs are, but all the wealth is. I mean, and it's all these 25-year-old boys like what's his face on Facebook, you know, or Yelp or wherever. They're all men making, and Google making these hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and there are no young women out there.
Well, you know, it seems to me when you look at it going backwards, as if men, in the beginning there were women. And not as many, but nobody could complain like they can today. It looks like men got a hold of this field, created it as a kind of machismo field, and made it a field that looked unwelcoming to women. What I want to say to girls is, look, when I was going to law school, not to mention those who were going to medical school, very unwelcoming. You can't let men decide which field you should go to. I must say that, yes, I believe science is particularly challenging. It doesn't come as easily as some other things. But I agree with you. If you started very early, making girls understand that STEM is really exciting, by the time they got to even high school, you would see things begin to happen. But to change the culture, you got to start when they're very young.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, too, if you look at the statistics. Women and girls do as well or better than boys in school in math and science. So from early on, the numbers don't justify why now here as adults, so few of them are in this field. When the wealth is there, as you said, the jobs are there will be growth there. It just seems like they're not following the trail they should to these profitable jobs.
There's a drop-off in the primary and secondary education in this country.
Yeah,
we don't emphasize as much. We don't emphasize science, technology, engineering, and mathematics as much in our secondary schools as we could.
It's also, we can't leave discrimination out of this discussion because AAUW referenced a study actually where you had in science, they had resumes that were presented to scientists, the exact same resume, both with a man's name and a woman's name, or what would be presumed to be a man's name or a woman's name. And folks were much more likely to think that those with a man's name, competent, credible, and someone that they should hire. And so we can't leave that out of the discussion.
Okay, and how do you bring that in? Because believe me, it was being brought in 20 plus years ago at Carnegie Mellon University, which is one of the best tech universities in the country.
Yeah, and I think a piece of this, I absolutely think it's important to encourage girls and to make sure that folks are getting education, but we also need to look at the power holders. And by that I mean we should be publicly shaming and calling for accountability from these tech companies that we know are overwhelmingly male-dominated at the top. You know, I simply don't think it's an acceptable excuse to say that the pipeline is empty and there's no one to hire. They have some explaining to do.
Definitely not. You make a great point. When women aren't on boards, I mean, we're losing out. When corporations aren't held, their feet aren't held to the fire for having more women on the boards, we're definitely not showing our young women what's possible. But I'm hopeful because of organizations like Girls Who Code and Finding Ada, which they target emails and workshops and trainings to women like me, millennial women, who may have started in one particular field, but they're teaching us how attractive it could be to change our careers and how lucrative it could be. And with millennial women especially, given that we freelance more, or we're more likely to freelance rather, and we are more likely to change our careers before mid-career hits, I think this is a beautiful thing when these organizations can step in and say, hey, you don't have to be stuck in that job your entire life. Here's a challenging new tech career for you. Why don't you learn how to code?
All right,
that's
ladies,
great.
Jump on in, please. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/tothecontrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
So I got a 5 on my AP biology exam and decided to take biology just for fun in college. And I'm very explicitly doing it for fun, so I wasn't a pre-med student.